Hello, hello. This is Denise, and I am bringing you my review and recap of Love After Lockup. We're picking up on Season 3, Episode 39, The Third Time's the Charm, ? So we start off with Rachel and Doug. And Doug has a son, Dougie, who's 12 years old, that Rachel has recently been raising since Doug, was in prison. And apparently Rachel's mother, Michelle, has established a relationship with little Dougie herself because Rachel has been raising Dougie. So we pick up with Rachel and Doug waiting for Rachel's mom, Michelle, to bring Dougie home so Dougie can see and be reunited with his father, Doug, now that Doug has been released from prison. And all the adults and Dougie sit down, they all talk, and Rachel's mother asked Doug about his career plans, about having a trade or some type of skill in order to earn a living. And Dougie explained to Rachel's mother, that he did learn some skills in prison, but he didn't think those would really translate to the outside world. So he would just have to go on his own and fend for himself. And Dougie was quite outspoken, I will say. Dougie said right in front of Rachel and in front of Rachel's mom, Michelle, that his father had 10 girlfriends over 3 years. And that was because Doug showed his son Dougie the ankle bracelet that he was wearing. And Doug said something about seeing Dougie have a girlfriend on TikTok or something like that. And Dougie said, well, at least I only have one because you've had at least 10 over 3 years. So Doug did earlier reference there being a problem with Dougie's attitude and his smart mouth. And Doug did say that Rachel let him get away with a lot of things that he wasn't intending to continue to let Dougie get away with. So we'll see further along in the episode where that goes. So we switch over to Deontay and Nicole. And Deontay picked Nicole up to take her to his apartment for the first time. And Deontay decorated the place in his best romantic way, where he had the apartment outfitted with candles and rose petals everywhere, and he had lights on the wall in the bedroom. He took Nicole to what he said was the guest room that nobody had slept in, so he decorated it with lights on the walls. He had gifts for Nicole. He presented her with sneakers and a huge teddy bear and lingerie. And he asked Nicole to put on the lingerie and model it for him. And Nicole, in her confessional, said that when she was in prison, she danced for some of the people who paid her. And that was a way that one of the ways she made money while in prison. And she put on the lingerie. She came out, she modeled for Deontay, but she told him he could look, but he could not touch. And Deontay went to taking his shirt off, and she said, no, you can't get naked. And he said, well, I'm just getting comfortable, but you go ahead, please dance for me. And so she did something. I mean, if you want to call it dancing, you can. Feel free. But she said that she didn't feel really comfortable in the lingerie because of her small breasts. She said that she needed a boob job in order to feel more confident about herself. So, of course, Deontay, being driven by his hormones, he promised to get Nicole a boob job. And then Nicole started kissing him in order to thank him for the promise of a new boob job. And Deontay thought it was about to go down, and apparently it did not, because we saw Deontay outside of the bedroom door, getting the door closed in his face while he was begging Nicole for attention, which he did not get. So the door closed on Deontay, and we go over to the next couple, Courtney and Josh. Now, Courtney was actually a corrections lieutenant, and she got fired from her job for dating the prisoner Josh. So upon Josh's release, Josh, unlike most of the convicts that we have seen on this show, Love After Lockup, Josh actually is showing us that there are people who actually do get rehabilitated after being in prison, because Josh has come out and he has expressed his thankfulness and his gratitude to Courtney for sticking by him, for supporting him. He has talked to her about short-term goals, long-term goals, how he wants to be there with her and for her, and he wants to express his appreciation to her for all that she has sacrificed and all that she has done for him, which is quite a refreshing change from the lying, scheming, scamming convicts that we have seen on this show throughout its time being on air. So Josh also has expressed regret over his past actions, where he was telling Courtney that he wanted to reach out to his grandmother to apologize to her for the way he treated her, because apparently Josh wrote a scathing letter to his grandmother where he lashed out at her. And Josh recognizes now that he was wrong for doing that, and he wanted to apologize. So he called his grandmother and let her know that he had been released from prison, and that he wanted to see her face to face so that he could apologize to her and make amends. And initially, the grandmother said, I don't know about you coming over to visit. I don't know about that. But then she actually did agree to allow Josh to come over to her home to visit, to apologize in person. And we learned that Courtney had actually been spending time with Josh's grandmother after the loss of his grandfather. So that was nice to see Josh wanting to make amends and take action to show responsibility and accountability for his past transgressions. Okay, so then we go to Anissa and Jeff. Now, Anissa has been in what she considers to be a relationship with Jeff for over 11 years. And Jeff had been released 2 times prior. So this was Jeff's 3rd time being released. Hence the title of this show's theme, The Third Time's the Charm. So Anissa made plans to take the long ride to pick Jeff up, but she arranged for her friend Kyle to go on the ride with her so she would not be alone. And she acknowledged that she spent tens of thousands of dollars on Jeff during his time in prison. So Anissa showed up to wherever Jeff was supposed to be dropped off, toting her homemade DIY welcome home Jeff sign, like she was at the airport or something. But Anissa, according to Jeff, Anissa was a hustle who gave him money. And he said, I couldn't understand his diction quite well, but he said it was $50,000 or $60,000 that Anissa had given him during the time that they had known each other over the 11 years. And he said he spent that money all on drugs. And looking at Jeff, I'd say, yes, it is obvious that he spent that money on drugs. During the ride home, Anissa and Jeff were trying to, catch up on things, trying to talk. And Mr. Kyle, the third wheel, kept speaking up and stepping in. And Kyle said that he wanted to see how things would go now that Jeff is out and has been released. And he said he wanted to see Jeff's reaction when he finally got to Anissa's home, to see how he would feel and see how things would go. But Anissa and Jeff had to get to the halfway house, so they weren't going to Anissa's home at that trip. They had to get Jeff to the halfway house. But Kyle was talking, in futuristic terms, like he was going to be there whenever Jeff gets to go to Anissa's house after spending whatever required time he has to spend in the halfway house. And Kyle said to Jeff that this has been a big part of his life. Now, how Anissa, being with Jeff for 11 years, being stood up twice upon his release, and spending $50,000 or $60,000 on him, and Jeff using it all on drugs, being a big part of Kyle's life. I don't know how all that translates, unless Kyle has unrequited love for Anissa. So he's in the friend zone and he's playing his lane until he gets a chance. I'm thinking, this is purely speculation on my part, but I'm thinking Kyle is holding out hope that Anissa will maybe come to her senses and realize that Jeff is really not the right man for her, and that maybe Kyle will get his chance to be with Anissa, because I don't get why Kyle would feel like Anissa's love life is such a big part of his life. I mean, he was there as a friend along for the ride, but Kyle spoke like he's quite involved and invested in this relationship. So I just don't get that, but we'll see how that one plays out. And let's see, then we go back to Rachel and Doug, and Rachel was cooking Doug's bologna. Apparently she didn't do it right, so Doug had to take matters into his own hand and use that microwave to cook his bologna the way he likes it cooked. But Rachel says that she loves Spam, so that's what she likes to cook. And all I have to say to that is yuck. So we get back to Courtney and Josh, and Courtney was driving Josh to his grandmother's house, because Josh, of course, wants to ask for forgiveness and make amends with his grandmother for the nasty letter that he wrote. And we learned that Josh's mother was on drugs, and that's why she could not raise him. And Josh's father had visitation, but he lost his visitation rights because he was giving 5-year-old Josh beer. So Josh talked to his grandmother. He apologized to her. He made amends with her. And the grandmother was very open and receptive of the apology. And she did also remind Josh that Courtney had been there for him and had been a saving grace for him. And he did acknowledge that with a lot of gratefulness and gratitude, which I commend him for. And Josh was expressing to his grandmother that he wants to actually have a wedding with Courtney, because 2 years ago, while Josh was in prison, they got married by double proxy, where they had 2 people stand in for them to carry out their wedding ceremony. So Courtney chimed in and said to us, the viewing audience, that, she also wants to have a wedding. That would be a dream for them, and that she has a long-term goal of owning thousands of acres of land with farm animals on it. So it seems like Courtney and Josh have worked out a long-term goal that they can both achieve together. So that's really good. Then we go back to Rachel, Doug, and his son, Dougie. And Dougie, again, strikes with the smart mouth. And Doug realizes that his son does have an issue making smart remarks that are inappropriate, especially for a 12-year-old kid. But they were at the restaurant eating, and I'm just going to highlight Dougie's comments at the restaurant while they were eating. Dougie told his father, Doug, to stop winking at him, and he called his father a weirdo. He said, "Stop winking at me, you weirdo." Doug said, "Hey, you need to really tone it down and talk to me with respect." And Rachel did a confessional where she was telling us that, it's a big transition, and Dougie has some anger issues, and they just need to find a happy medium to get to the point where they can communicate openly and honestly without it being a problem. But I have to say, she enabled some of this smart mouth actions from little Dougie by not correcting him when and where it happened, because when this season first started, we saw Rachel go into Dougie's room and ask him if he was hungry or something like that, and Dougie said, "Don't ask me again." And I was like, wait a minute, Who is the adult here? Who is the child? Who's being housed? Who's being fed? Who's being educated? Who's being taken care of? Dougie. But he talked to Rachel like he was providing for Rachel, and Rachel did not correct him. Therefore, she's enabling the bad behavior. And as I said, Doug has acknowledged that Dougie, 12-year-old Dougie, does have a problem with his mouth, and it's going to have to be addressed. Moving on, as while they were at the restaurant, Dougie told his father, "Cut my pork chop, you slave." And I was like, well, okay, first of all, you're 12 years old. Learn how to cut a pork chop, sweetheart. And calling his father a slave, a man who's been in prison and newly released, that was really, really inappropriate. And it could have touched off a nerve. And I'm glad that Doug, the father, exercised self-restraint and self-control and just let Dougie know, hey, you need to cut this stuff out. But Doug did cut his son's pork chop. And Dougie did reference that Rachel cuts his pancakes. Cut my pork chop, slave, like Rachel cuts my pancakes. Oh, so he's giving orders but can't cut his own food. You see, folks, there's a problem. It needs to be addressed. So, Doug did say that the smart mouth coming from his son was going to have to be addressed. He was giving him time to transition, but I can see in the future Dougie, the son, saying something that really hits the wrong note and the wrong nerve of his dad. And I can see Doug saying or doing something that Rachel would not be willing to do in terms of discipline. So I hope between Doug, the father, and Rachel, that they, being the adults in this situation, get 12-year-old Dougie some counseling, because that's what he needs. Rachel is as big as her heart is, and I give her credit for taking on a child that's not hers, housing this child, feeding this child, nurturing this child, educating this child is not hers. I give her credit for all of that, providing this child a home and stability so he wouldn't wind up in foster care or whatever. I applaud her for that. However, she's not a disciplinarian, and she certainly is not a counselor. Dougie, the son, needs counseling, and I hope they get him counseling because he's 12 years old. He apparently has anger issues, and rightfully so. I mean, given his mother is a drug addict, didn't raise him, and his father was in and out of prison, mainly in prison ever since he was a year old. So he doesn't have that family stability and structure, or he didn't have that growing up. But now that he's 12, he's got it. So, time to get counseling for the young man. Hope it works out. So then we go over to Deontay and Nicole. Now, Deontay is driving Nicole to the hair salon, and he said to her that he didn't like the way the previous night went. He took her to his apartment. He made it really nice and romantic. He set the tone, made it really, nice with the candles and the rose petals, gave her gifts and all of that. And she basically shut the door in his face after, getting him to commit to giving her a boob job. He hasn't gotten the romance that he has been expecting yet. So Nicole was like, well, hey, look, I just got out of prison. I'm not ready. And, it's not time. And I'm not having this argument with you again. So she was presenting him with attitude instead of, kind of showing some empathy for his situation, because, what man is going to spend all this money and time on a woman and not expect some reciprocation, But, hey, he took her to the salon. Nicole went into the salon to get hair extensions. And apparently one of Nicole's former prison buddies works at the salon. So the prison buddy was asking, well, not prison, I should not call her prison buddy. The woman is free now and she's working at a salon. So Nicole's friend was asking Nicole what did she think Deontay wanted in return for everything that Deontay was giving her? Because of course, Nicole, being in the salon around the women, she was bragging about all what Deontay bought for her. So the friend said, "Well, do you think what do you think he wants in return?" And Nicole was like, "Oh, I know what he wants in return, and he wants sex, and I'm not giving it to him." So there, Nicole is actually confessing. She's admitting that she's using him. She's scamming Deontay. She's taking advantage of Deontay. She's definitely dealing with him from a position of entitlement. And she is telling her friend, hey, he's not getting what he wants. So that is really showing Nicole's true character or lack thereof, because she doesn't really have any real good character. And it's unfortunate, but Deontay should know better. And he doesn't, so he's hopefully going to learn. He's going to learn, because this is a life lesson. But Nicole told her friend that she has had sex recently, because the friend asked her, when was the last time you had sex? And Nicole was like, with a woman or with a man? And the friend looked surprised, and I don't know why, because Nicole looks like she's down for whatever. And Nicole said that she had sex about a week ago with a woman that she was in prison with. And Nicole went on to explain in her confessional that she doesn't feel that being with girls is cheating. So she doesn't intend to let Deontay know about her sleeping with women, because she doesn't feel like that's cheating. Now, we all, of course, know that Deontay, of course, will feel like that's cheating, because he's not getting any. So whoever these women are that Nicole has slept with, or that Nicole recently slept with, I'm sure aren't giving her money and gifts like Deontay has given her. And Deontay came in to the salon to pay for Nicole's extensions. So that's where the episode ends, with Nicole on the phone calling one of her previous girlfriends, I guess, from prison. So thank you for joining me for this wrap up and recap of Love After Lockup. This was season 3, episode 39, Third Time's the Charm. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I should be back next week with you to do the recap of our next episode, because we definitely want to see how Jeff winds up treating Anissa now that he's free, and after he stood her up 2 times. So we'd like to really see if the third time will indeed be the charm, and if he will be the guy that she has been hoping for these 11 years. And we definitely want to see what Deontay's last straw is going to be. I think Josh and Nicole will be just fine, because he seems like he's such a good guy. He's so remorseful for what he's done in the past. They would have to show us Josh really flipping the script on Courtney in order for this to be a drama-filled relationship, because otherwise Josh is showing us that he has been rehabilitated, which, is very, very nice, and it's very sweet, and it's a breath of fresh air, because we don't normally see that. I'm waiting to see what goes on with Stan, because, Stan has allegedly had too much to drink, and that is why he told her she could get out, and told Lisa she could get out and go solve her own problems with her family. So we'll see how Stan treats Lisa once he has a good night's sleep and sobers up from whatever wine he had to drink. So thank you for tuning in, and hope to see you again. Thank you so much.